Hey everyone, welcome to the Wild Chronicles podcast, where every episode we look at what God's doing locally and globally to find ourselves in greater awe of who He is. And here we are at the penultimate episode of the Celebrate Church Tour, guys. It's crazy. We only have 2 churches left after this episode. There'll just be one. It's crazy. It's crazy we've done this, Lord. I mean, I say it to God, I say it to you guys too, which is probably like the 3 of you that have watched these episodes. Thank you for tuning in. But yeah, here we are to talk about the church I went to on Christmas Eve, the great Lakewood Baptist Church, guys. And this one surprised me because I actually added this one pretty late in the church tour because it's technically in Pewaukee. It's not like in the main Waukesha core, which I made sure to go to every church in the Waukesha core, but in the Pewaukee, like outskirts and stuff, I didn't add every single church. And this one I remember I passed by it while I was doing a worship over Waukesha day. We were praying in the neighborhood and I just drove by and was like, oh, there's a church here. And so I figured, since I'd never heard of this church before, it was probably really small, but like, it was not really small, guys. This was a crazy penultimate episode of the church tour because I went to this church and I thought it was going to be like one of those like 12-person Baptist churches, which I've been to, little small Baptist churches in this journey, which have been good in their own way, right? But this Christmas Eve service, there was 1,000 people. And granted, like, some of that is the Christmas bump, right? Like, a lot of people go to church on Christmas that wouldn't go there on any other day of the year. But like, for this crazy, like, the sanctuary was made to sit thousands. And so, like, you know, it was basically packed every single seat, like about 1,000 people, like, for this Christmas Eve service. So I would assume like their normal attendance is like 600, 800, but still very big church. And it seems like it's a very missionally focused, which I love to see, because I walked into this really giant building. They have a great open room, and like there's a room that has like the word missions like over it with like a Bible verse, like encouraging the church to be missionally minded, right? And I love when I go to churches that seem to have missions as part of their DNA. So that was really cool to see. Yeah, in their lobby, I saw that they had also these community group papers. So it talks about like groups that they have at the church. They have people located all over. It says they have people in Waukesha, Delafield, Conomowoc, Pewaukee, Sussex, Menominee, West Dallas, Watertown. They have home groups in like all these little regions, sub-regions, which means that this church is like, you know, it's spread out all over southeastern Wisconsin, as opposed to just being like in that little Pewaukee neighborhood like I kind of thought it was when I first passed the church. No, it's like, it's literally spread out all over. And so it was really cool to see that. They also had these cards for this thing called Risen Hope Church, which is a church plant that they're actually doing, where they're planting a new church in it. I believe it's the New Berlin area. It doesn't say on this little flyer, but they had magnets where you could like put this up in your house to keep praying for this new church that they're starting in West Dallas or New Berlin. I always get those confused. It's somewhere in that like between Milwaukee and Waukesha area. They're planting this new church, which is so cool. A church that's planting another church. Like, that's the biblical model, is like for the churches to not just grow to be bigger than themselves, but then to go and expand and to spread out and to impact others, right? So that's really cool that they have that heart. And they also had this little thing for their young adults ministry, which I took, and maybe I'll check it out because this church seemed pretty fiery, and I'm always looking for like other young people who really know Jesus and pursue after his heart. So it's really cool that they have that as well. So very, very cool things. I got there about a half hour early for the Christmas Eve service. So their service was at 4. I got there about 3:30, and I ended up sitting down next to this guy. I think I have it in my notes. This guy named Dan. It's hard to forget the name Dan because Dan is my best friend, right? But yeah, so I was sitting next to this older guy named Dan, and he was asking me about like, you know, how often do I go to this church? Have I been at this church before? And I was like, well, no, I've never been to this church. It's my first time. And he was like, well, what's your home church? Like, what churches have you gone to this year? And I was like, well, this is my 59th church of the year. And I got to tell him all about the church tour and like how I've been going to different denominations. And that was cool. He was telling me that he actually grew up in a Lutheran church. And then him and his wife had been going to a Baptist church for 25 years. And now they've been going to a community church. So they've kind of like hopped from different denomination to different denomination and seen God moving as well. And I told them, like, you know, God's heart is, you know, not division, not judgment of people that are different than us, but to love them. And we had a really good conversation all together. You know, he was even asking me what my plan is for next year, like after all of this. And I was able to like tell him a little bit about the prayer room and how I want to do that, and how I also just want to be in a community that's more stable and consistent, as opposed to hopping from one church week to week to week. So I'm hoping next year that'll happen. Like, whether that's like starting something on my own at my house, or whether that's like being on a service team at a church or two, like, I'm excited to see what that looks like in 2026. So to be continued, right? But here we are in 2025 to talk about the service. So Yeah, the Dan guy was great. He said that him and his wife were actually just at the church for that day because that he normally goes to a community church, but his kids go to this Baptist church, and he was there with his daughter and son, I think, maybe both. I don't remember, but he had children that were here, and he was coming to be with them for the Christmas service, right? And there was a lot of that. I saw a lot of people like they were saving like entire rows. They had like Bibles on the seats. They were like, "Please don't take these seats. I'm saving them for my family." And then like it was funny. The Dan guy was like, "Hey Zach, where's your family?" And I was like, "Oh, they're all at my mom's house, like already starting the Christmas stuff. I'm gonna go to there after church." So so I went to the family stuff after church. Just went by myself, but. Yeah, I think that'll be a nice thing about next year's church experiences too. Like, it's been cool to go up to all these churches just as like a wanderer, like a vagabond, just all by myself most of the time. But I think it's fun to go to church with people that you know too, because then you get to have that shared experience, right? And you can talk about it together. And yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the church is like when you're in one for an extended time, as God intended, like for you to commit to one or two places and really be growing there is that then you have other people that you can grow alongside, right? And it's not just like you're just going to get poured into or even just to pour out because, like I was at Life Changers last week and they were actually talking about how worship isn't for us, right? Like a lot of the time in, American church, it feels like, oh, like which church is going to feed me the best is the way that we have the mentality of church. But really like, and I wouldn't say it's not for us. I think that worship is simultaneously for us and for God, right? Because it's us doing what we were made to do. Our purpose is to worship. And so when we worship, it should be good for us because like that's literally what we were made for, right? But at the same time, like it wasn't just for us like to worship and feel good, but it's to worship God because he's worthy. And so, when we worship God because he's worthy, that's when we see our purpose be fulfilled. And so it's cool when you get to do that alongside brothers and sisters in a consistent setting. But anyways, back to this church. So yeah, Lakewood Baptist, they're going into the service. After a little bit of waiting and talking to the Dan there. Oh, also one thing Dan said about his community church is that he actually, this past summer, they had 13 baptisms, in a river or something. And like that their church every year does like baptisms in a river. So that's like encouraging to hear that other churches are, making an impact and, and people are getting baptized. And he said it was young people too, which was really cool. Like one thing I noticed about this church today, Lakewood Baptist, is there were young people on stage. Like there were young people on stage in the choir, and as part of like, everything that was happening, you could see a lot of young people in the room. And again, like there's going to be a surge because of Christmas Eve, right? So I can't tell for sure like what this congregation is like on an average Sunday, but like the fact they have a young adult group and all these community groups and they have young people on stage as part of the leadership, like, and like leading the worship, like I think that indicates that there's an emphasis on the next generation really being on fire for Jesus here. And that's what I love to see, and hope to see more of. So really cool. So anyways, so they opened up with, of course, Joy to the World. They obviously opened like it's a Christmas service, right? So most of this is just going to be Christmas stuff, but like, again, there's ways that the Christmas story can be presented in a way that like hits deep, right? And they took a really cool angle with it, which I'll get to in a little bit when I talk about the sermon. But they opened up with Joy to the World, and then they had a kids choir of like, about like, I would say like 20-30 kids up on the stage, like singing their own little songs, which was really cool. There was one song they sang later, which I thought was really beautiful, which I'll get to. But they sang The First Noel was another song that we did, which that's a Christmas song I haven't heard a lot recently. Like I've gone to a lot of churches this month that have been doing Christmassy stuff. But The First Noel was not a song I'd heard recently in a long time. And yeah, it was pretty. It was pretty. Then they read from Luke 2, of course. You got to read from Luke 2. That's the Christmas story. And the quote I wrote down in my notes that stood out to me while they were reading it there was Mary pondered all these things in her heart, right? Like I think that's really cool. And I think about that verse a lot, especially right now in relation to the new year, because like at the end of the year, like I always see New Year's as a holiday of a time of reflection to remember all God did in the past year and then look forward to what he's going to do in the future. And like when I think about Mary pondering these things in her heart, like I feel like that's like the mindset she had, and like, wow, like look at all God's done to like help me birth the savior of the world. And then like thinking to the future of what God's gonna do, like, wow, like my child is gonna save the world. Like that's crazy to think about, but like even just thinking about our own futures with God, like, thinking about his past and what he's already saved us from, and then like what he can still do as a result of what he's already done. Like it's encouraging. And I just love to always think about that verse of Mary, like being somebody that reflects, because that's what we're called to do, I think, is to reflect on what God's done and like let ourselves be overflowing with gratitude. So then they sang "I'll Come All Ye Faithful" was another song they did. And now they did this song called "You're Here With Us," and this was really cool because this was another song that the children's choir did. But this song "Here With Us" was like, it was about like the mystery of Jesus being a baby. Like in the song it sings like, it's a mystery to me, like how you were a baby, how the God of the universe was a baby. Like that's insane. Yeah, like that's just crazy to think about. Like the God of all creation who made the entire world became a freaking baby. Like that's mind-boggling to think about. And then and like another line in the song I wrote down was heaven's love reaching down to save the world, right? Like he reached down from the highest high place and came down to save us. Like it just like is so powerful. And like that song kind of transitions into the message too, as I'll get there in a second. But anyway, so then they went into 3 readings. They did Isaiah 9, which is the classic Christmas scripture of the prophecy of how Jesus will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. I love all of those. Remember those Bible verses from my childhood and stuff. They also read from Matthew 4:12-17, which told about how Jesus would eventually like come and John the Baptist would come and they would like say to repent for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then they also read from Revelation 21, where it says that God will be with his people as their God. And those are like all paraphrases of those scriptures, but those are like the lines that stood out that I wrote in my notes, right? And they're reading these things kind of to paint the picture of like the before, like before Jesus came, like this is who it said he was going to be. Then like when he came, like this is what he said, the kingdom is at hand. And then that he's going to come back and he's going to be with his people. And that really relates to his name Emmanuel, right? Because that's one of the names of God is Emmanuel, which means God with us. And so like those verses about, you know, God being with his people, like relate to Jesus, his name literally being like God with us, right? So that's so cool. So yeah, then they had another song that was sung by a duet on stage called How Dark the Night, where they had someone playing piano and guitar, which was cool. This was also like a pretty strong like instrumental church. Like I mostly noticed piano and guitar. There might have been a cello. There's like some other stringed instrument. I think it was a cello, but I'm not 100% sure. And they had a lot of singers on stage, like I said, young people as well. So really, really great. For all these songs, they had a very strong choir. And like it was powerful because like a room of 1,000 people were singing. And you know, sometimes in like mega churches you don't actually hear everyone singing, but here you really heard everyone. Because I mean, I think the Christmas songs are very familiar. They're easy for people to sing and get into. But I would even like look around and see like certain people like closing their eyes as they sing the songs. Like at the end they sing Silent Night, spoiler. They didn't do the candle thing though. Like most churches have like succumbed to like, we're gonna do the cheesy candle thing where like everybody gets a candle and you all light them when we sing Silent Night at the end. Like, you know, most churches have gotten to that point where that's just like the tradition that everybody does. But here they just sing Silent Night without the candles. And I was like, you know, I kind of like this better. You're not trying to make it into something extra, but not to say that the candle thing is fun, like the first or second time you do it, but like once every year, every church is just trying to do the candle thing, it kind of loses its meaning. But anyways, though, but during Silent Night, I saw like some of the people standing next to me really closing their eyes, and you could really see them pondering in their heart, like how profound it is that Jesus like came down as a baby to love us and to show he cares for us, right? And gave us heavenly peace. Like that's whole song's about sleeping in heavenly peace, right? And I could see like the joy on young people's hearts all around the room as they were like closing their eyes and pondering that and letting that sink in. And as someone who hates Christmas and doesn't really love it myself, like just because there's a lot of extra stuff to Christmas, right? It's not all biblical, but it was cool to see like people in that room, like some of those people that were pondering and like feeling like the weight of Jesus, like, you know, coming for us, like, you know, this might have been the only time they've been in a church this entire year. And so like for them to hear about the peace of God and like to be touched like that is significant for them. For me, it's just another Sunday. But like for the people that are tasting and seeing it for the first time, they see it with awe and wonder. And really, like, even if we have seen it for the 1200th time, like we should still have that awe and wonder. It's just easy to get overly familiar with it and lose that awe. And like, you know, that's why I try to do this thing of like going to the churches and staying in awe and wonder, like stay in awe and wonder. That's like literally the theme of this whole thing. But like, it's hard. It is hard to stay in awe and wonder when you're so immersed in it all the time. But like those people that are just tasting it for like the one time this year, where the only time this year where they like think about Jesus, like they're like being touched so deeply, like that's very profound and so beautiful to see all around me. I was very moved by that. And, you know, it makes my heart yearn to like have that same awe and wonder for God, like in every moment, and not just be like overly familiar with it. So Anyways, yeah, they sang this song called How Dark the Night. And then they moved to the sermon. And the sermon was basically called Riches to Rags. And so it was basically like a play on like the common phrase rags to riches, where like, you know, a lot of the time, like, you know, the story you want to see is like somebody who's like living in the slums and they eventually become like a millionaire and like rich. And like basically you go from having nothing to having everything, right? Like that's the dream that everybody wants when they're poor and they don't have a lot. Like that's a dream I want. Like I don't have much, but like it would love to be great to have a lot, right? But like he was talking in the sermon about how Jesus did the opposite. Like he came from the highest place of riches, like the kingdom of heaven, the throne of heaven, to rags. Like he came down to the most humble position, and like let himself be nothing, right? And that was so profound. Yeah, and so like he really emphasized grace in his message too, which I think was big, because I think this year for me, like, it was funny because I originally thought this year was going to be a year of discipline, of like me doing really, really hard things for God because like he deserves it and I should like be willing to sacrifice and be willing to like push myself to the core and like suffer for God, basically, right? Like that was my heart this year. But like what ended up happening is like I failed so hard at like giving myself for God and like being wholly devoted to him. And like, you know, I made so many mistakes and I like screwed up many times. And yet this year has been a year of God's grace because he's been good to me even when I haven't been faithful to him. And that's been so profound. And like, one thing I wrote here that the pastor said in his sermon, which kind of relates to that, is he says, he was rich, but for us, he became poor. And by his poverty, we became rich. And then Christianity begins by receiving and not by achieving, right? And like earlier this year, I wanted to achieve. I wanted to do all this stuff for God to like, not even like because I felt like I had to, but because I did love God, like at the beginning of this year. And I still love God, but there were times where it became cold because like my love for God became like an obligation I had to fulfill instead of something I got to receive, right? And when we receive God's love, then it overflows naturally versus like when we're trying to force God's love and like force ourselves to do it, it's not really love in that point. And so it's really cool that, yeah, there was just this reminder of like, you know, grace is like receiving God's love, not by achieving anything, that we receive his grace. And when we receive his grace and his love, then that helps us to love others. It's something that flows natural. It's not like something we have to force ourselves to love other people, but instead let ourselves be loved by God and then let everything flow from that. So that was really cool. Yeah, and like even the pastor, it was in the altar call at the end, he was talking about like, do you know the grace of God and have you received it? And like, you know, it's an honest question. And like, I can honestly say with confidence, this year I have received way more grace than I am worthy of. Like, I have been a train wreck. Like, I've been physically sick. I've been spiritually sick. I've been emotionally sick. I've gone to Celebrate Recovery. I've like my car, I crashed into a pole and now I have a new car. And like the craziest thing right now is actually that I just found out for sure yesterday that all of my student debt from my entire college has been forgiven. And that's crazy. That's $17,000 of debt that is gone. And that's crazy because I thought I was going to have to work like 4 or 5 years to pay off all that debt. And like a miracle has happened where it's gone and now I don't. And that like opens me up so much to do what God's actually calling me to do instead of just paying debt for the next few years. So insane. And I don't deserve that at all because like I have not been, you know, I really haven't been faithful with my money or my finances or anything. Like, but God has given it to me and I'm so humbled, and it like it stirs me to want to be better and do my best in this next year, but not out of a place of achievement. Like last year, it was all out of a place of I want to achieve these things for God, because I love him. But this time it's more like, God, I know you love me. And because you love me, this is why I want to do these things. And I think that shift is so big and so beautiful. But yeah, I just wrote in here utterly undeserved goodness of God, because that's my life. And that's what he's preaching about the Christmas story. Yeah. And so all that said, yeah, it's not about what we've done for God, but what he's done for us. So receive it. And I love that the Christmas message here today was all about just receive it, receive Jesus. And, you know, they had an altar call at the end for anyone in the room that hasn't received him, you know, but and again, very beautiful gospel presentation here too, because it would have been easy to just tell the Christmas story and end the day, but he really did like go into like, no, this is incredible that God gives us his grace, not because we earn it, but because of his love. And that's really the story that should be preached every Sunday. Like so much of like religion is now about like, this is all the things to do for God, right? But when we come back to what God did for us, like that is the heart of Christianity, and that's the heart of why we do what we do, and it's the heart of why it's worth it, even on the days it doesn't feel worth it, because like he did so much more than we could ever ask, think, or imagine, and he still got more in store. So because of that, we celebrate, we rejoice. So they finished the message, they have the prayer, and he said, go have a good Christmas. And so like after that I left, and I headed out to my Christmas celebration at my parents' house, and then I went to the Christmas at my grandma's the next day, and then I went to the casino with my grandparents the next day, and then I went to urgent care today, actually, because the last 3 days have not been good for me health-wise. I have been very sick because I slept on the couch on Christmas Eve because my sister and her husband are here for a few days, and because of that, I couldn't sleep in the room that was like more safe for my lungs, and so I slept on the couch where the cat sleeps, and so it like really aggravated my asthma, and it's been really bad for 3 days. And last night I even had to sleep at my friends Mari and Connor's house to try and get my lungs better. And today I went to urgent care, and I was really praying I didn't have to go to the hospital again, because the Lord already taught me lessons at the hospital last month, and I'm like, I don't need that again. And if I had to go to the hospital, it would have thrown off everything, because I wouldn't be able to go to the final church tomorrow, because tomorrow is Sunday, final Sunday of 2025, and the final church I'm going to is Mari and Connor's church, where my friend Connor is on the worship team. He's the worship pastor leader there, and I've been wanting to go to that one the whole time. So it's going to be a finale that's going to be fantastic now that I don't have to go to the hospital, right? So God's grace once again showing itself at the proper time, right? And then after that last one, like I'll probably make a video about it on Monday or Tuesday next week, and then 2026, right? I don't know what's going to happen with the podcast then. I don't know if we're going to keep it going, if we're going to just take a hiatus for a little while. But I still want to stay in awe and wonder of God, right? And maybe that'll happen a little bit more behind the scenes of making videos every week for a little bit, but the idea is still to stay in awe and wonder. And, I'm excited to see how the Lord helps me to do that. And I think the way that he's going to help me to do that is not necessarily by achieving, doing all these things, but it's going to be by receiving and just letting his love transform me and change me and move my heart towards his more and more each day. So that's what I got, guys. Lakewood Baptist sounds like a great church. Again, this was a Christmas Eve experience, so perhaps a little different than what a normal Sunday would be. But it was a church that made me want to come back on a normal Sunday, which is good. Like, I can't say that about every church. Some of them I'm like, yeah, one and done was probably enough. But this was one where I was like, I could see value in coming back here, because they really seem like they have a lot going on that is very, very, very encouraging. And they're missions minded and community minded, which is all stuff that is beautiful. And they have young people. I love young people. So a lot of positive reasons to keep going back in the future. So maybe I will. And if I don't, then you can check it out yourselves. So all that being said, guys, thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, stay in awe and wonder. The final time, it's coming up. It's going to be good. Bye.